The new universal education remained intellectual and academic, not practical and professional. In the last decades of the century, the idea of knowledge for its own sake and the whole concept of universal knowledge for the purpose of philosophical education, understanding was swept away by a great tidal wave from across the channel, whose chief source was Germany. All the educational ideas I have mentioned so far had this in common. They regarded knowledge as something that existed already. There was little thought of discovering anything true that had not previously been known. But by the 19th century, the power of natural science and the scientific method to discover new knowledge had become so obvious that it could no longer be prevented from influencing universities. Originality and discovery became the prime values. The idea of the university as a museum, repository of learning, gave way to the notion that it should be dynamic, a place where knowledge was discovered and generated. Scientific method and the new values were not confined to the natural sciences, but were in fact applied to humanistic studies as well. In a certain sense, the triumph of science, or the idea of science as what should be behind an education, triumphed across the board to some considerable degree. Now, the new knowledge required specialization, hard, narrow training at the expense of broad, general education for the purpose of philosophical understanding aimed at by the advocates of universal knowledge. Champions of the new order, therefore, changed the definition of liberal education. An Oxford classical philologist put it this way: it is the essence of a liberal education that it should stand in constant relation to the advance of knowledge. Research and discovery are the processes by which truth is directly acquired. Education is the preparation of the mind for its reception and the creation of a truth-loving habit. He believed that knowledge obtained by rigorous research would produce truth, and that only truth could lead to morality. Research, therefore, could provide and would provide a new basis for morality. Useful knowledge, good examples, and wisdom were not to be thought in the past, but in the future. That required the application of scientific method to all subjects, which, in turn, demanded, again, specialization. New knowledge, moreover, did not fit neatly into the small number of old packages that made up the traditional university organization. Science and social science kept creating new fields and new subfields, all of which had equal claim to attention and to a place in liberal education, since every one of them applied the correct method, the scientific method, and all claimed to produce new knowledge and truth. No one could or dared to rank subjects according to an idea of their intrinsic value or usefulness. Practitioners in each field came to have more in common with their fellow investigators in other universities than they did to their colleagues in fields other than their own at their own universities. Both they and their students became more professional in their allegiances and in their attitudes. Preparation for an advancement in a career became the chief concern of both. The distinction between a liberal and a professional education became ever more vague. These developments seem to me to have been the forces that have shaped our own universities and remain dominant today. Now, I have made a quick dash through this inadequate capsule history of the idea of liberal education, because I think it may be a useful basis for examining the status of liberal education today and for considering what direction it might need to take in the future. I am struck by the fact that every claim ever made on behalf of liberal education is being made at some college or university at least some of the time. At some places and sometimes, all the benefits are claimed at the same time. In evaluating the performance of major American universities in meeting the various goals of liberal education sought over the centuries, I come to conclusions that surprise me. It seems to me that the education provided at a typical liberal arts college today comes closest to achieving the goals sought by English gentlemen in the 18th century. To be sure, success in that world did not require any particular set of studies or specialization. If it had done so, I am sure the training then would have contained some equivalent of the modern departmental major. In most other respects, our curricula today, with their lack of any collection of works or even subjects studied in common, the absence of agreement on any particular method of training the mind, the lack of a culminating examination testing the acquisition of a fixed body of knowledge, the emphasis on well-roundedness defined only as the opposite of narrowness and achieved by taking a few courses in some specified number of different fields. Seems to me all that fits 18th century England very nicely. If we examine the full reality rather than only the formal curriculum, I think the similarities are even more striking. I submit that in America today, the most important social distinction, one almost as significant as the old one between gentle and simple, is whether or not one has a college education. Within the favored group, finer distinctions place a liberal education as opposed to a vocational or merely professional at the top of the social pyramid. Graduates of the better liberal arts colleges are most likely to marry the most desired partners and to hold the best positions and appointments in business and in the professions and in government. That is true and widely understood, and that is shown by the fact that each year there are great numbers of applicants for every place in the freshman class of such colleges at a cost of perhaps $60,000 each year. I'm sure that figure is already obsolete. A phenomenon that is otherwise absolutely inexplicable. Apart from any pre-professional training they may obtain, successful applicants gain about the same advantages as those that were sought by young Englishmen from their somewhat less formal 18th century education. They sharpen useful skills in writing and speaking. They pick up enough of subjects thought interesting in their circle and the style of discussing them to permit agreeable and acceptable conversation. They learn the style and manner, the political opinions, and the prejudices to make them comfortable in a similarly educated society. They have excellent opportunities to make friends who may be advantageous to them later in life. This education, of course, is purely secular. There is, moreover, no attempt to shape good character, for the better universities lead the country in the direction of a kind of education, a kind of relativism, I would go so far as to say even nihilism. The message that seems to get through is this: do your own thing and demand that everyone else in the world behave according to the strictest possible moral code, as it is, by the way, as it is currently understood in the halls of the most favored colleges. No doubt the absence of religion and the failure to shape character would disappoint an 18th century gentleman. But in other respects, I think he would not be dismayed by what is called a liberal education today. Other definitions and objects are, I think, less well served. For instance, the search for general universal knowledge and for the philosophical principles on which it may be based has long since been abandoned. In truth, I think it never had much hope of support anyway. Nor do I think that most modern attempts at liberal education encourage the pursuit of learning and knowledge as an end in itself. I doubt that many students were ever deeply impressed by that goal. But when there was general agreement that there was a core of knowledge worth learning, one that all educated people could share, and one, therefore, that could readily serve as the basis for serious discussion of important questions, and thereby perhaps yield wisdom, I think then there was a far greater chance of success than there is today. It might be thought, at least, that those values produced by the study of the natural sciences, of research, and of scientific method flourish in today's version of liberal education. I mean the rigorous training of the mind, the inculcation of a truth-loving habit, and the universal triumph of the scientific method. But I am inclined to think otherwise. In liberal arts colleges today, the study of mathematics and the natural sciences is separated from other studies in important ways. The study of the hard sciences is committed to rigorous training of the mind in a single method, the scientific one. Teachers of science continue to believe in the cumulative and progressive character of knowledge and in the possibility of moving towards truth. Students who major in these subjects are likely to acquire the method and to share these beliefs. Though teachers and students are interested in the practical uses of science, I think many of them come to value learning and knowledge as good in themselves. But we have to face the fact that only a minority of students in liberal arts colleges major in mathematics or the natural sciences. In some programs, students who do not major in these subjects are required to study neither. In others, there is a minimal requirement that rarely achieves the desired goal. But hasn't the scientific method made its way into other disciplines, and can't its benefits be obtained through them? Where the attempt has been made most seriously is the social sciences, and there it has been a failure. It is increasingly obvious that trying to deal with human beings, creatures of independent will and purpose, as if they were objects like atoms, molecules, cells, and tissues, that produces unsatisfactory results.